So, you have an idea for me? Yes, sir, I do. So you know how football works, right? Sure. Well, I figure we could create a game where we pretend to be managers of a football team, except with actual football players. Okay. And what should we call this thing? Well, it's all imaginary, right? So I was thinking like make-believe football. Well, I do sometimes fantasize about Joey Bosa and his big muscles. That's it! That's what we can call it! What? Fantasy muscular men? No! Fantasy football! I like the sound of that. So how does this thing work? Well, each week you set your lineup, right? Uh-huh. And then depending how each of those players do in their actual games is how many points you're gonna get. So your lineup is made up of players that are on different actual NFL teams? Exactly! And I figure everyone can spend hours and hours each week doing research, trying to figure out what players to start, pick up off waivers. Ooh. And how about we make it so that waivers roll at 2:30 a.m. on a Tuesday, so you either have to stay up super late or wake up super early to get good free agents, either of which will just absolutely ruin your entire Wednesday. Sure! And I was thinking we can make the scoring completely arbitrary so that players will lose their matchup by a fraction of a point and end up spending the entire next week angry that their player didn't get one extra yard. Right, pushing yourself through a mob of 250-pound linemen should be easy. That player needs to get it together. Totally. And I figure we can make it so that people are mad whenever players get injured, just totally dehumanizing them in every way. Sounds great, but what's the point of all this gonna be? Money. Ooh, money! I love money! Yeah, we can all pool our money together, and then the winners will get most or all of it. Isn't that like gambling? Well, technically, but I figure we can pitch it like a fun, harmless, competitive thing, even though everyone will know that we're gambling. Okay, well, I'm in. Great! I'll take your deposit. Sir, the deposit is due. Sir?
1, 2, 3, 4.
Well, fuckers. Here we are again. As we get ready to kick off another fantastic NFL season. First game going off tonight, Ravens versus Chiefs. I'll be talking about that game a little bit later in the podcast. But we're also starting off a new milestone, Season 3 of the podcast. And I plan on bringing you guys a season of all the classic antics you expect from the podcast. Now, since everybody's had a chance to be on the podcast and have an interview, we're bringing it back. We're doing more skits. We're bringing in more comedy. We're bringing in some wagers. We're making it real spicy this year on the Fantasy Freestyle Podcast. Man, it really is great to be back. The offseason feels like it's so fucking long. Having the Super Bowl in February with fantasy ending like somewhere in January. And then eventually hockey is over. Basketball is over. Then we're in the dead of that horrible heat. Nobody wants to go outside. And it really feels like it's an eternity. And now we're back to the good part of the year. We got football to kick everything off. Then we got Halloween. Then we got Thanksgiving. Then we got Christmas. Then we got New Year's. And the whole time, we enjoy the fantastic weather of Las Vegas, Nevada. It's the trade-off we get for the pain we endure during the summer. You know what? I actually want to start a petition right now to take a vote to try to make the beginning of the year be in August. So that way, we get all the good stuff in the beginning of the year, and then we just leave the end of the year, you know, the hot-ass summer, blah, blah, blah. You just want to get it through and get ready for the next year to start. Well, I know I'm ready for this year to start on the Fantasy Freestyle Podcast, so let's get into it. As usual, on our first order of business on the podcast is to get some housekeeping out of the way. Now, I'm a little bit behind on giving you guys this, but there's plenty of time for you guys to plan your schedules accordingly. And what I mean is this year's 2024 League Meetup schedule. We have 3 meetups this year like we did last year, and we will continue to have. These are for your name points. So for those of you that were at the draft games this year, you got to see the actual advantage of having extra name points in the bin when your name is drawn. And so showing up to these events not only is a fun way to chill with your homies, gain camaraderie, and drink some beers and watch your favorite sport, but you also gain a tangible advantage over the rest of your homies for just showing up. So, for the September meetup, it will be September 29th, Sunday Night Football, Buffalo at Baltimore. These two teams ended last season on a hot streak, and as of right now, from what we know, it should be a high-scoring game. So, for Sunday night in September 2024 League Meetup number 1. Number 2, October, Monday Night Football. October 28th, my New York Giants at the Pittsburgh Steelers. This is just a few days before Halloween, so we'll see if the New York Giants are a monster to be reckoned with, or if they're a clown like everybody is suggesting. Next up, in November, we have our Thursday Night Football meeting, and this is with most of y'all's favorite teams, the Raiders versus the Chiefs. On November 29th will be our third meetup on Thursday Night Football. Right now, the Chiefs are the powerhouse team starting off the season, and the Raiders are the underdog team in that division, but who knows? By the time that there's 3/4 of a season before that matchup comes around, and nobody knows who will be winning on any given Sunday. So, that will be our third league meetup for this season for name points. And coming up next, I have my prediction for tonight's Thursday night game with a little bit of an exciting twist. But first, as I had promised you guys, I'm going to go over and rank all of your guys' draft since the NFL.com's rankings were complete and total bullshit. Now I'm going to be going in order from 10 to number 1, and this is just in my opinion, but you're listening to my podcast, so who else's opinion would it be? At number 10, I think all of our opinions would be a consensus on this one. Unfortunately, it is my boy Hristo. Unfortunately, he got boned by the auto draft this year, particularly in the running back squadron. He has Jahmyr Gibbs, who is questionable to start the season, and his number 2 running back, Jonathan Brooks, is on the NFIR list, so he's going to be out for at least the first 4 weeks, which has forced my boy Hristo to pivot to some lower rank running backs, which hopefully will show up for him in this matchup against me this first week. But to add insult to injury, not only did the auto draft let him down in the running back area, they drafted 2 kickers for him, so unfortunately that's how it goes with auto draft, and not everybody's able to make it to the draft every year, which is a reality of being an adult and playing in a fantasy football league. So you don't win the season from the draft, so we'll all look towards Hristo as he starts on his journey with hopefully some roster moves, maybe some trades, maybe some unexpected pop-offs from his players. But to start off the season, I have his draft at number 10. Number 9, and this one was hard, really. All of these rankings were hard to place in position because we really did a good job. And that just goes to show that we don't need 2 minutes per draft pick as we did last year. 1.5 minutes is good. Which, let me take a moment, by the way, to shout it out to all you guys. Thank you so much for your patience and your cooperation in working with me through the ordeal of the draft that we had this season. I'll admit, I did not set the draft far ahead of time, and I thought that I could still set it in the last 30 minutes, which now I've learned that lesson. I'll get it done plenty ahead of time next year. I hope you guys can all understand that running this league is a little bit of a juggling act, you know? And there's a lot of things that I have to take care of, and I just want to take this as a moment to appreciate you guys for backing me up in all of that. That said, continuing on, number 9, Raul. Unfortunately, he put himself in the overall worst draft position voluntarily. That's picking from the 10th spot, which is the last spot in our league. And the reason being is that you take basically 2 picks at a time and you have 20 picks in between, which is why this is the worst spot. The converse being the first overall, but at least the benefit there is that you get the first overall pick. Anyway, that being said, I didn't think that he had a bad draft. I think he was able to pull together a decent squad, and you know how he does. He's a master of the waivers and the hash-slinging stasher. So I'm sure that this won't prevent him from having any type of banger season, he thinks he's always the top scoring, blah, 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 blah. So we'll see with this draft here. So he started off with Justin Jefferson, which we all know is now being thrown to by Sam Darnold, which I don't think is going to stop him from being a good fantasy asset this year. But as his number one pick, he's already starting off on a hard foot. Puka Nacua is number 2. Everybody knows that he's going to be great. So that's a solid number 2 wide receiver. On the running back side, James Cook is predicted to pop off this season. So I'm excited to see how he does for Raul's team as his number 1 carrier. His number 2 and 3 running backs are Josh Jacobs and James Conner. Both guys of which I think are very talented and have a good medium-ish, high-ish upside, with a good amount of floor as well, so old reliable. Now the part where I think he kind of fumbled or pivoted a little too late was taking his quarterback in the very late rounds. Now I'm not saying that Jordan Love is not a great quarterback and he's not going to be, I don't know, top 10, top 15 for sure. But after all the talking he did about taking Patrick Mahomes and taking Caleb Williams later, it just kind of seems like he didn't have his plan fully on track as he was going through this draft. That being said, best of luck to you, Raul, my boy. I will see you in week 4 and 13. And you are, according to my rankings, the number 9 ranked draft in this year's season. Now, going over to number 8. Jeffrey Dahmer, a.k.a. Jefferson Airplane. Chef. Double invested his 4th and 5th round picks in the terribly dangerous stack of Lamar Jackson and Mark Andrews. Now, while that is one of the top stacks that you can get for your team this year, the unfortunate side of that is that you're left with only backup ass sidekick players for the rest of your squad. Guys like Jalen Warren, Chris Godwin, McLaughlin, and Jordan Addison, which, by the way, if you guys haven't been reading the league notifications, Chef drafted Jordan Addison, then he dropped him. Then he put in a waiver claim and picked him back up. Then he dropped him again and picked up Aaron Rodgers, thus effectively putting him at the bottom of the waiver claim for absolutely no reason, which is why I want to congratulate Chef for starting off the season with this season's dumbest roster move. We'll see if he's to be outdone, which I'm sure he is, possibly by his own self. But for now, this season he goes into this year with the number 8 draft ranking. Number 7, it is the champion of this last year, Eric. The reason I have him at number 7 is because he started off with the real high testosterone injection of a draft. He took Breece Hall, Derrick Henry, Travis Kelce, which, as a result, left his wide receiver 1 as Jalen Waddle, or T. Higgins, or Keenan Allen. Any of them could be the number 1, but the reality is they're all number 2s on their team. So, we'll see how the season pays off going forward for him with this big muscly man approach. But, for now, he's going into the season with a number 7 ranking. Number 6, I have myself, which, looking at my draft, I'm not too terribly disappointed. I have the Jalen Hurts and A.J. Brown stack, which should be a good stack, even though I absolutely despise the Eagles and everything about them and their city. Hopefully they're good in fantasy football at least, otherwise I'll just have more reasons to talk shit. I am happy that I have Malik Neighbors, but in contrast, I wish I had more young guys on my team. I feel like I have a good solid core of older players, but they're probably on the path to maybe diminishing by the middle of this season. So I'm going to have to make good roster moves, maybe some trades, maybe some waivers on some younger guys, and maybe roll the dice more now and see if I can get lucky on some new players. Number 5, I have Edwin. He's right there in the middle. He's balanced. He's even. He has a very balanced roster. On one side, he has Bijan and Rachaad White, which he snaked me on, by the way. I was targeting Rachaad White, and he was the pick before me. Anyway, he also has Stephon Diggs and Garrett Wilson. So overall, his starters are very good. Now, the reason why he's not ranked higher is because he has some players on his team that are predicted to be very good, but are, let's say, not yet proven. At QB, he has Anthony Richardson, which is predicted to be very good this season, as well as his tight end Kyle Pitts, his two onesie positions. Kyle Pitts now has a capable quarterback, so him and his buddy Drake London, who's on the next upcoming ranked roster, are both predicted to be doing better because of Kirk Cousins. Now we'll see how Edwin fares to do throughout this season. We all know he has recovering to do from last season, and I wish him the best going into this season with his number 5 ranking. Number 4, I know you heard your player called out and you're getting excited because, Vaughn, you are the 4th best drafter of this season. Now, as somebody who fell into the first overall, since Chef got picked first but didn't want to go first, for whatever reason, your team really looks like you drafted first overall. He's got CMC, he's got Patrick Mahomes, he's got Drake London, Devontae Adams, and Tank Dell, who are all good, talented wide receivers who are in a kind of iffy situation. They could end up being the number 1 for the teams that they play for. He also showed his true Chargers fan loyalty in his draft by taking 3 Chargers players, which earns him the Shit Where I Eat award for this season. He took Gus Edwards, J.K. Dobbins, and Ladd McConkey, which I think he dropped J.K. later on, but he had a very good draft even though he was very Charger happy. I rank him as number 4 for this year's season. At number 3, I have Hen Dog, Anytime, Anywhere. His team has a tremendous balance as well, but with rock star starters. On his team, he has Kenneth Walker, Snake Quan Barkley, and David Montgomery to pair with his teammate Amon-Ra St. Brown for his wide receiving core, matched with Deebo Samuel on the other side. And that's not even it. He has a stack here with Brock Purdy and Deebo Samuel, but that's not even his starting quarterback. He has Joe Burrow. All of this combined high-end upside potential plus great balance in his team earns Henny a number 3 spot in this year's draft rankings. Number 2, almost first but fell a little short, Donathan Park, aka Cincinnati Don. Now I really like his team because he also took a tight end and quarterback stack, but he took the number 1 quarterback in Josh Allen and he stacked it with Dalton Kincaid, which, if you guys have been following along with the Bills situation, Dalton Kincaid might be their number 1 receiving target for this season. He also got a tremendous value on DK Metcalf, which is a player that I've drafted in a lot of my mock drafts. I was trying to take him here. And he also took a late round quarterback flyer in Caleb Williams, which is a strategy that I also took this year, and I think it was a popular one. Donnie basically drafted exactly how I draft, and his team came out fantastic to show for it. That's why he's the number 2 drafter in this year's season. And we all know it. I think we all saw it coming when we looked at the rosters and we said, how does this guy have all these good players? Greg at number 1. Starting with CeeDee Lamb, Marvin Harrison, Devontae Smith. He got fantastic value on Devon Achane, Jerome Ford, and Tajay Spears. And to top all that, he has kick-ass onesies in CJ Stroud and Sam Laporta, who he got a tremendous value on in the draft. All of these things combined are setting Greg off on a very good foot to start off this year's season. And I know all those mock drafts in practice paid off. And to show for it, you have the number 1 ranked draft going into this season. Congrats. Alright, and before we wrap things up, I wanted to propose to you guys a new idea that I have for this season going into the podcast. You guys know that I always give you guys a preview of the Thursday night game going on later tonight if you're watching this on the day of release. But this year I figured I'd spice it up a little bit. I'm going to take one team to win on each of these Thursday night matchups, and at the end of the fantasy football season, if I'm above 500, I'll be good. Maybe I'll award myself with something. But if I'm below 500, I'll do some type of punishment. Which right now, this whole thing is a very nugget of an idea, but I think it can grow by the time we get to the end of the season. So if you guys have suggestions, pop them into the group chat after you watch this episode, and maybe we can get something kind of going and some kind of idea for what my punishment will be if I'm not on point on my predictions. Now, tonight's game, the kickoff, the season kickoff, the day that we've been waiting for, that we've been counting down for months. It's the Chiefs versus the Ravens. The Chiefs are favored by 3, and the over-under right now is 47.5, which means this game should be as exciting as it sounds. And I do believe in the Ravens with Derrick Henry, the number 1 rushing team from last season, with Gus Edwards in the backfield, who scored 12 rushing touchdowns. Now, upgrade from Gus Edwards to Derrick Henry, with Lamar Jackson in the backfield, ready to throw some deep bombs, maybe take off running. I know this team is dangerous, but I also know that the Chiefs' defense is a little bit underrated. They were fantastic all throughout last season and through the playoffs. Now coming back into this season, I'm going to take the Chiefs going into the first game as my first Thursday night pick. So like I said, I'm going to develop this idea. Maybe I'll even come up with a little clever name for it or whatever. But start keeping track and start thinking of maybe some creative ideas that might be a cool punishment for me to do on the podcast. You guys saw last year I wore makeup and a wig. So get creative and let me see what you guys can think of. And I just might do it. All right. And just like that, our season has officially kicked off into action. Hopefully you guys give me a good, decent run back on this first kickoff episode of the podcast, since I know we have new kickoff rules now in the NFL, and hopefully that leads to more kick return touchdowns. And we will see as the season progresses and we start seeing which teams are good and bad that are different from last year, and we see which star players are popping up or which new guys that are unexpected are taking the front line. All super fun, exciting stuff that I can't wait to see in fantasy football as we start this exciting season in the 8th year of our fantasy league. So sincerely, best of luck to all you guys in this competition that we have going on through these next 14 weeks. And I'll see you on week 2 of the Fantasy Freestyle Podcast.